Nobody likes to deal with pain, but it's a common experience for so many Americans. We're going to talk today about how to deal with chronic pain. What is that all about? So I'm here with Dr. David Johnson, and we're going to share some ideas together. David, tell us about chronic pain. What does it look like? What are we talking about?
Yeah, you know this if you have it.
Yeah.
It's a persistent form of pain that, despite some maybe original acute injury, the pain perception has lasted.
Okay.
So it's affecting approximately 100 million Americans.
Wow. Okay.
And these are people who experience pain longer than 3 months. There's going to be this associated toll in your emotions. There's going to be usually a loss of functioning in some way.
Yeah.
You're right. It's a big problem here in America.
You started to mention the toll that it takes. Let's talk a little bit more about that. Let's talk about the cost of chronic pain. What are some of the ways that people feel that toll?
Sure. Yeah. So there's the obvious, right? The physical
Sure.
injury, right? That it might limit your functioning. You know, maybe you're a grandfather or a mother who wants to be crawling around on the floor with your kids or throwing a baseball with your son. And you can't do it. You've got, the most common kinds of pain in this category is migraines and headaches, which might just put you out of commission.
Right.
Back pain is the second biggest, and neck pain. So there's going to be just a limitation on what you can physically do, which costs Americans quite a bit.
Yeah. So what are some other ways that it takes a toll?
Yeah, and these are ways people don't often assume or see initially, but there's a great emotional toll to this. When
Sure.
you're chronically hurting, it drives your irritability up,
Right.
which leads to people feeling often depressed, anxious. When is my next flare-up of anxiety going to happen? Feeling kind of out of control. And that, of course, has great social implications because
Sure.
we're social creatures and we have a social contagion to our emotions. So our partners might say, hey, I don't want to be around you when you're this irritable all the time
Right.
or grumpy.
Right. And I imagine it would have financial implications as well.
No doubt. Yeah. And that puts a huge strain on families when mom or dad can't go to work. In fact, it's the number one reason that people seek long-term disability. But the financial toll, but also just the lack of purpose then for a person to go out on disability and not be able to contribute to this world. It does real damage to our sense of meaning.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
One other area that people often don't think about too is just this kind of spirituality that we have, this sense of connectedness to a higher power, to others. People don't realize that some people get very angry at God. Like, where are you,
Right.
God?
That's a great
when
point.
I'm, here in pain and I've asked for help and you're not here.
Right.
So it can really rupture people's relationship with God.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, like you said, if you are experiencing it, you know what it is we're talking about.
Yeah.
But why?
Right.
What are some of the ideas that science gives us about where does pain come from or why does it persist?
Right. So there's the specificity theory, which just says you had an injury to your back, let's say a bulging disc, and that's the reason. It's a tissue issue.
Right.
It's an organ issue.
Right.
But beyond that, what they found in the 1960s, some scientists discovered this. They called it the gate control theory, and it says that we're both physical and mental beings. We have a mind-body connection. So imagine that there's a type of gate in your spinal cord, and it's sending pain messages from the injured area, say my lower back, up to my brain, that gate can be opened or closed with certain factors. So for example, you may have had this experience where you're in pain, but yet in some specific moment, you're able to forget about that because you're so in the zone, let's say, watching your daughter's musical theater production, and you're so enthralled with it. So our attentional processes can really shift our perception of pain.
Yeah.
And one of those factors is things believing that pain is unbearable and then it's unpredictable.
Okay.
Meaning that I'll never be able to live the life that I want to, and that I have no control over this.
Right.
That actually flies the gate open, and here comes more pain.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, so our thoughts have an effect. Other physical factors like muscle tension. So when we're tightening our muscles, we're kind of bracing for pain. That in fact can make the pain worse. It can open up these signals. Social factors can do it too. So people in your life who you believe you can count on, if they're not there for you, that can actually open the gate. You can feel this sense of being alone in this fight,
Right.
and that
Right.
magnifies the intensity of the perception of pain.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are all things that maybe intuitively we've sensed,
Right.
but we didn't really know how to put a name on it or put a finger on it.
Yeah.
That makes sense in our experience.
Yeah.
Well, then let's get to the good part here, and that's how to cope with pain.
That's right.
Speaking, as someone whose your field is caring for souls, we know that there are some physical medical approaches, but what other kind of approaches are there as well?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we often go to a doctor. That's
Right, you're
the
going to
number
get
one.
a prescription for a painkiller or something like that.
Unfortunately, that's right. In fact, one study has shown now that Americans seem to be increasing in their perception of pain, meaning every year
Okay.
more and more people are diagnosed. And even some theorists would say that using pain medications, especially opiates, perhaps is sensitizing us to pain even more, that we have perhaps a poorer pain tolerance
Right.
than we used to, say, a generation ago.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're right. There are things that we can do beyond just medical help, which is important. But beyond that, it's a holistic approach, and
Yeah.
that's really you have to view it as a toolkit. That no one intervention will be the cure-all, the panacea.
Right.
You have to go for everything. So the clients I work with who seem to have the most success are employing all the tools that we have. So, for example, there are many things that people can do mentally to increase their perception that they have control over their pain.
Right.
One, for example, some studies about they do these studies with they call them ice baths. So they'll take these buckets of ice and they'll ask people, okay, put your fist in this bucket
okay.
and hold it as long as you can.
Right.
It's kind of like a mini form of torture,
Right.
but they're doing it
They're
voluntarily.
creating pain
It's for
in order to
science.
measure that, right?
Exactly, yeah, it's for science. So they do this and they tell one group of people, okay, put your hands in this bucket and try to keep it there as long as you can, and do kind of whatever you want to do in order to get there, whatever strategy you employ, okay?
Right.
The other group of people, they tell, put your hand in there, keep it in as long as you can, and describe for me what pain you're having. Objectively label the sensations in your hand and the types of sensations you're having, and notice how it changes over time. Interestingly, that group of people can keep their hands in longer. So
that is interesting.
yeah, so a curious observation without a catastrophization. That's the key.
Right, okay.
That this is just something happening to me that I can label, bringing kind of a curious acceptance. Like,
Right.
this hurts, but I'm not going to run from it.
Right.
And that's ironic because people are often trying to stop their pain,
Right.
and they may actually be magnifying the intensity of it
Right.
by doing it.
By running away from it. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So this comes from this theory of mindfulness and acceptance. That's one approach. Another, one of the most common approaches is cognitive behavior therapy,
Okay.
which says, let's look at the thoughts you have when you have a pain flare up and ask, are those thoughts balanced and realistic? So for example, if I have a migraine one day, maybe I'll think to myself, I'll never be able to get to my daughter's wedding because what if I have a migraine, right? My daughter's 4, so I don't have to
Right.
worry about that right now.
Right.
But if I'm thinking about that, I'm making myself suffer,
Yeah.
right? I'm already having pain of the headache, but now I'm suffering, imagining my future.
Right.
And I don't know what's going to happen in, hopefully for my daughter, 20 years at least
Yeah,
before
yeah.
she gets married. And so anything could happen. So I have to loosely hold my thoughts and not believe every thought I have.
Right,
about
and
my
sort of evaluate what I'm thinking and what it means.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Really filter out some of those thoughts that are unhelpful or untrue.
Right.
So there's a thinking process and then there's a behavior process. And so the clients who are out creating meaning in life, they're volunteering at their local community garden, they're watching their kids' soccer games, they're out doing their artwork. Those are the people who, for even if it's just moments, are getting a break from their pain because their attention is on somewhere else. They're creating meaning, and they kind of bring their pain with them rather than letting their pain shut them down from the rest of their life.
Right.
So those are, but there's also these non-traditional interventions, and some people feel differently about them, but things like yoga,
Sure.
acupuncture,
Right.
chiropractors, massage therapists. I tell people if it works, knock yourself out, go for it.
Right.
If it gives you even a moment of pain relief, try everything.
Yeah.